Hi, I'm Michael Smith for Nevada Trails. Tonight I have a very special show. I have Pat Hickey, who just wrote a book called Tahoe Boy. Thank you for joining us on Nevada Trails. I've read 103 pages so far, and I've really enjoyed it.
Was it good for your insomnia problem?
Yeah, yes, it was. It was
Good.
I like history a lot. If you've seen the show before, I do a lot of history, and I've also moved around a lot in my life. And from reading a lot of your book, you've had the same type of life as a youngster. You've moved around a lot, and from a very turbulent time, you went through a lot of things, and now you've returned home. And
The Journey Back Home.
The Journey Back Home
So
is kind
it's
of
called.
the theme of the book is kind of that. And Tahoe is an interesting place, and it's blown up so much since you were a kid, I bet. And you dropped some names of some places that I really enjoy. Unfortunately, Cecil's Supermarket was knocked down when I was here.
Cecil's Market, yeah, it's now
That's
part
one.
of the huge heavenly conglomerate, whatever is there now, condominium culture.
My girlfriend's heartbroken over that one.
Yeah.
And you mentioned Nell's Hardware Store. That's a place we buy things from time to time. And
I worked there until I could no longer find where the nails were, and Kenny Caples, they had kindly let me go.
well, you named a lot of people and places, and you made a very personal story. And I just every time I go to the places, I'm like, yeah, that's one of my places I go to too. And it just sounds like you had to work hard as a young man.
Well, first of all, Tahoe's a very special place to grow up. I mean, even to visit, as Mark Twain and others have noted, but to actually have grown up there in the 1950s and 60s. In 1950, there were only 150 or so families that, in fact, lived there year-round.
That's right. I remember that. That's not a whole lot of people.
And so it was a very small, tight-knit community, and therefore, very special to grow up in.
So you pretty much knew all your neighbors then.
You knew your neighbors, and you knew you'd see your second-grade teacher in the supermarket, and if the note hadn't gotten home to Mom, she would deliver it directly while in the produce section.
Well, you had to get to work early too. I think you said you started working at the age of 9 in your dad's ice business.
Well, my dad was one of those World War II veterans, and sort of overcame any post-war trauma by working himself to the bone.
Oh.
He, at one time at the lake, had the heating oil business and the Hickey Ice Company, was the postmaster of Bijou, which was a little suburb in the ski run area, had the garbage business, and so I got pulled into, one or more of those entities from the age of about 9.
Well, I didn't remember reading about your activities in delivering mail. Would you?
Oh no, I didn't deliver the mail. No.
Were you sorting the mail, or?
No, we used to throw snowballs at the postmaster at State Line.
Oh, no.
I know, when he came out to deliver the mail, but no. No, I didn't deliver the mail along with Snowshoe Thompson. I'm not that old, Mike.
Oh, I thought you'd waxed his keys.
Okay.
But in any case, I enjoyed your quote about your dad being the first designated driver, because I'm Irish myself, and I can picture it.
Well, that was actually my grandfather, Pat Hickey, who had the earliest ice company up there.
Oh, okay.
He used to cut ice out of Cascade Lake and other places, and Brooks Park of Edgewood's Pond, which, as I say in the book, is the only place that has the distinction of both my grandfather cussing at it and Charles Barkley when he slices his shots in it every year at the Celebrity Golf Classic.
That's an absolute beautiful piece of property.
Yeah, it is. That was just the family's ranch land, really. They were fortuitous, obviously. But my grandfather was Irish in every sense of the word. And the story comes from relatives that, yes, he had to actually get a designated driver for his horse and buggy, because all of his customers, they brought ice at that time, carried them up the lakeside stairs for people's refrigerators. And, he loved to gab as an Irishman, and they loved to share their Irish whiskey, and that was a recipe for him not getting his deliveries done before the ice melted. So he actually hired a kid to do the driving and move things along before the product was wasted, I guess, or him.
Well, that would, yeah, I thought that was, I could visualize that, because but that was when I first came to Tahoe about 7 years ago, I shoveled a lot of snow. It's the easiest job you can get in Tahoe. If you want, they always want people to shovel snow. And I did a lot of the houses that were like 150 steps up, and then several steps down, and make sure the tourists were happy with their little areas. But some of these houses were pretty old. Were they around back then? Where you
Well, I
actually
don't
carrying
know
up?
that there were the giant ones with 150 staircases.
They were some pretty steep places.
Before the billionaires drove the millionaires out of Tahoe.
Oh.
But we shoveled snow. We jumped off roofs. I have the distinction, so I'm told, of being the first person to have broken his leg on the gun barrel at Heavenly Valley, which was just a hop, skip, and a hitchhike from my house on Ski Run Boulevard. And I broke my leg there on Friday the 13th, much against the advice of my mother, who said, this isn't a good day to go.
Yeah.
Of course, I didn't take her advice then or numerous times in the future.
Sounds like Heavenly was a fun place to play.
It was a great place to learn to ski.
I think your mom kind of kept a watch on you too. Was she there? She had a premonition when you were coming down the hill or something?
Well, she had told me not to go, but she was nonetheless at the bottom of the lodge. And since it was a snow day, we had a dump of Sierra cement, and it was only myself and the ski patrolman even skiing that day. And I'm dating myself, but we still had bear trap bindings. So once my ski went into that mogul, there was nothing else except a spiral fracture to be anticipated there. So she saw it all happen and told me as I was coming down in pain and trauma, you shouldn't have gone, you should have listened to me. It wasn't the last time I didn't listen to you, Mom, but I still love you.
Well, I went to some school there at the community college at South Lake, and if there was a powder day,
everybody was gone.
Everyone was gone.
Yeah.
I hadn't skied in years. I was like, I'm by myself.
Yeah.
And what really broke my heart is I love photography, and the teacher said he didn't want us to do any shots of Tahoe. He was tired of snow, and I'm like, oh.
I see.
But anyways, after your broken leg, you still became an accomplished skier. You had many. You were
everybody who skied. I was part of the first Blue Angels race team.
Blue Angels?
Yeah, that was the Heavenly Valley's ski team.
Did not know that.
And I skied in college for the college team. Was a helicopter guide for a powder expedition in Snowbird, Utah. Sorry.
They drop you off on the top of a mountain and you take the people down?
I took the hotel guests, Robert Kennedy's son, a bunch of other
Wow.
folks that could afford it to ski in the backcountry of Snowbird in the Wasatch Mountains in Utah. I got to do that for a season, ski bumming.
So ski bumming was a lot of fun for you.
It was a great time, even though I had to live in a linen closet to stay in the lodge with no lights. Never knew what time it was when I woke up.
I remember that in the book, but I don't think he even called it a linen closet being that nice.
Well, I think that's what it was. The maids usually woke me up in the morning when they needed their sheets.
Oh, jeez. Well, anyways, the broken leg did slow you down for learning how to ride a bike or something like that, where your friends were already accomplished and you took
Well,
your
it
while
was
to
an
get...
excuse. I was a little bit late in learning how to ride a bike, which is not a wise thing to do when you're 8 years old and to have to make excuses that I hadn't yet learned. But I eventually did, and that was the chapter of the book where I said my mom was like God, invisible but always present. She apparently was watching me out the backyard as I spent the 8 hours learning to ride the bike, crashing mainly, and cussing or using words that she'd only heard my grandfather from Montana ever use at 8 years old.
Well, I flashed back to you. I was reading your book on a little cottage in South Lake Tahoe on the back porch, and I was flashing back. My dad bought me a real big bike, and the way I could get off the bike was just fall down. And the only way to get on the bike was step up a curve and kind of jump on. It was very painful. But while I'm reading your book, and in this area of the bike story, there's a young man learning how to ride a bike with his dad in the back street on Pine Grove. And I'm thinking, boy, this is really interesting. I'm watching this whole thing, and Dad would come on and yell at him because he's going too far towards traffic. And there's only like one little intersection, but people don't slow down. And it's just a very emotional time in your life when you're a kid, to have your bike and have freedom to be able to go.
That's right. A bike is a boy's first freedom. I mean, back then we would ride all over the lake, go out from Ski Run to Camp Rich.
Yeah, you mentioned
every day. Now parents, and I'd probably be included, would be scared to death to have their kids riding on the highway with 4 lanes and fast traffic and things. We thought nothing of it back in the day.
I don't know. The bike paths are getting pretty good.
Well, actually, that's true.
And
now you can do it safely. We didn't have bike paths, obviously.
Yeah. Well, yeah, you had more of probably a lot of the weather and the challenges, but you you were from Ski Run and used to hang out in Camp Bridgerton area.
In the summer,
Yeah.
until my dad made me bag ice during the summer days, and I froze instead of got in a suntan.
Well, it sounded like you were cold. You mentioned something about the yin and yang of life after that, from going from the cold to the heat to the outside or something. I don't know.
Well, the simple analogy was, yeah, that was the first introduction to yin and yang, way before I met any Oriental sage. I was on the wheel of becoming, or suffering, I think as the Buddhists call it, working in the ice house while everyone else was at the beach in the summer.
I thought about that too, because I was a bagger when I was 16 in Florida, and I was like, I'm in here working, and people are going to the beach and they're buying supplies and things. And well, anyways, also you had a very good story about a sailboat experience where you're going to sail around the lake or something like that, and you lost a mast. It seemed very.
Well, one summer, we kind of got into sailing, and had a Lahobie cat, which is a catamaran, a fast sailboat. You get very wet, and so I had intended to sail all around the lake, but the night before leaving, we broke our mast out when a westerly came up near Sunnyside on the west side, and had to be towed in by a Coast Guard cutter with, as I said, our sail between our legs, or the pontoons of the boat. That was fortuitous, because sailing around the lake in a catamaran, I would have been wet for 1 week, for sure.
Well, some of these pictures going by, there were some young kids. Maybe think about that. They're kayaking by in this background, then the kayaks are full of sleeping bags, and you just know they're just going around the lake to do something similar as you did when you were a kid too.
Yeah.
So, so when he came back, and you mentioned a cabin of some sort. Did you build this cabin that you're talking about in the book?
Well, I talk about in the book that one of the few regrets from my father, and therefore I guess of my grandfather, was that they never saved any land at the lake. They had lived there very early on. And unlike the Park side of the family that kept all the land around Edgewood, which was just their ranching domain, my father and grandfather didn't manage to keep it. My grandfather had 40 acres on Marla Bay, which is now part of a property called Tranquility Estate. That's owned by Tommy Hilfinger's co-founder of the clothing line. And 5 acres of it is for sale for $100 million, including the house, of course. It was part of my grandfather's land, but he lost it during the Depression. So it was somewhat sad to my father that he had never kept any land there, and that they lost the childhood cabin. So one of my dreams in life was to be able to rebuild a cabin and pass it along to my children. You know, we all want to give some inheritance to our kids, but it's not just internal. You'd like something physically to manifest what you might feel towards family and memories. So I did manage to build a cabin. It wasn't at Lake Tahoe, as I said, not being a trust fund child of Bill Gates or Tommy Hilfinger. We had to buy our land in Mono County, but we did build a cabin up there at 8,200 feet along the Little Walker River, and it's just absolutely gorgeous. And I go there every chance I get. It's where I wrote the books. Some people ask you, where did you ever get time to write a book? Well, if you go to a cabin at 8,200 feet, and while we have some electricity we've generated with solar and other things, there was nothing else to do but to write at night, and it was a great getaway to be able to do that.
Well, go out and give out your website and your phone number, and then we'll take a short break.
Well, thanks. Yeah, if you'd like a copy of the book or to view the book and what others have said about it and some excerpts, you can find it at www.tahoeboy.net. It's also in some local bookstores, Sundance, Barnes & Noble, Borders, Carson Valley Museum, and other places.
Well, so far it's been a good read for me, and we'll take a short break, and we'll be right back. Thank you.
Thanks, Mike.
Hi, I'm Fish and Game Warden Patrick Foy. Boaters at Lake Tahoe should expect watercraft inspections at all launch sites around the lake. These inspections are designed to prevent the destructive spread of zebra and quagga mussels, as well as other aquatic invasive species. If brought into Lake Tahoe, invasive species will damage boats and the pristine waters and be impossible to remove. Remember to clean, drain, and dry your boat every time before entering a new body of water. Clean boats stop aquatic hitchhikers.
In order to protect our riding opportunities, we've got to tread lightly. That means staying on roads, trails, and areas designated for ATVs. Also, go over, not around trail obstacles to avoid widening trails. And cross rivers slowly, and only at places where the trail crosses the stream. Join the millions of responsible riders who protect our privileges and our natural resources by treading lightly in the outdoors. Visit Tread Lightly at treadlightly.org.
Hi, we're back from break and with Pat Hickey. And basically, sir, I'm going to ask you, why did you write this book? I mean, it's very, very personal, and you really put yourself out there, and it's very courageous. And I don't know.
Well, there's a couple different ways to answer that. One, I've always loved to write, and writing, since I was a child, helped clarify certain things for me. It brought out deeper thoughts, maybe a discovery of a deeper essence of yourself. So that's one way. Obviously, though, if you write a book, you're trying to say something to others. I've half jokingly said I wanted to explain to my kids and maybe my descendants about my very adventurous or crazy life, depending on how you want to characterize it. So that's one reason. But I also, on a little deeper, more sincere level, I had an experience that I write about in the book on a Good Friday when I was an altar boy at St. Teresa's Catholic Church at the lake, where I had kind of not an out-of-body experience, but I thought about what would it be like if I was attending my own funeral?
Wow.
And not just would people be sad to miss me, we maybe all secretly wish that they would have appreciated us more on earth, but I also began to think that there were so many people in life that I'd never really told how much I cared for them, whether it was my family or my friends or others later in life. And in a sense, the book is an opportunity to do that. Most of what I say about people is kind and good, sometimes funny, sometimes ridiculous because I'm included. But it is a way to say to people that I appreciated the way we crossed paths in life, and I write about those things.
Well, that's excellent. I enjoyed a lot of the ages. You've gone through a lot of stuff, and I really liked your mom in the book. And I just really enjoyed it. You dropped some names, some big time names too. You mentioned Ty Cobb as a kid.
Ty Cobb had lived at Lake Tahoe in his retired years, and he was a customer of my dad's heating oil business. And he even gave me a Louisville signed bat, which I guess is actually worth something, but I still have it.
I read that and I went, wow, that's a pretty major thing. But then people say he's a mean guy, and you were saying, no, he's not a mean guy to me.
Well, what I said was he was a lot kinder to me than he was to shortstops. He slid into.
Yeah,
I was just a little kid.
Yeah. And I don't know. I mean, like I've had the same type of experiences where everyone calls him a mean person, and someone's not a mean person.
Well, I had another experience I write about of having dinner with Ronald and Nancy Reagan in the book.
Oh, I haven't got there yet. Probably.
And I actually was at the head table, and one of the greatest fears of my life, because it was a dinner dance, it was 1 year after his presidency had concluded in Hollywood, and I was a part of a group of people that he was honoring that night, a colleague of mine who'd been killed in Afghanistan filming the Soviet invasion at that time of Afghanistan, the previous war. And President Reagan was giving tribute to that person, and I represented the Washington Times newspaper that I had worked for in honoring him that night. So I sat at the head table with Ron and Nancy Reagan, and I tell kind of a cheeky story of how Nancy Reagan told the story for probably the 10,000th time of how she came up with just say no to drugs. And I said I was bored with it, but I assume she was also bored with me being there as well.
Oh, jeez. You said that?
Yeah, I did say that.
Well, it's honest.
But it was very special to be with her husband, and there were other people. I write about Rush Limbaugh, who got me my first job at KOH Radio and Radio.
I remember that, and I was wondering. So this is when you lived in Sacramento and you knew Rush or something?
I knew Rush when he was, shall we say, a big fish in a small pond. Now he's, we all know who Rush Limbaugh is. No one knew him at the time. And I invited him back to a media conference in D.C. and actually paid his way because he was not that wealthy at the time. Mm-hmm. Now he could fly me somewhere if he remembered me in his own personal plane. But that led to me getting a job with KOH, even though I wasn't really a reporter. But I had interviewed him because I had some access to him, and that led to reporting on the Nevada legislature, doing a column here for the Nevada Appeal, editing the Nevada Journal, and then getting elected to the state assembly for one term and one term and done. Thank you very much.
Well, I remember that you were a reporter for the Nevada Appeal, and what made you decide to run for the assembly?
Well, I guess I had written about it. I was sort of approached by folks who heard I was moving to Reno. I was getting a master's degree in journalism, so we decided to move to Reno. There was an open seat, and because I knew a lot of lobbyists and assembly folks, I was actually encouraged to run by a Democrat, although I ran as a Republican and was elected for one term.
Well, I've met some young men on that assembly, and there's some really sharp people. Settlemeyer is one that comes to mind right now. And a man it's on the back of your book. I met him when I first moved here, Lynn Hetrick.
Very wonderful person. He was
Yeah.
the Assembly Minority Leader and co-speaker for a brief time, but while I was there. And I mentioned him in the book. This is, again, an opportunity to say something about someone. And in politics, we all hear so many bad things, understandably, in this day and age. But Lynn was truly a person who lived by his conscience. And he would always tell us, even though he was the head of our political caucus, and you have political agendas and goals to try to sometimes vote as a bloc, but his bottom line was always vote your conscience on a bill. And I appreciate it. It speaks to the kind of person that Lynn
He was
Hetrick
one of my
is.
favorite people I've met here. When a few years ago, my girlfriend won state champion of her small business, and the assembly was out, and he made sure she got an award. And it's just something special that he didn't have to do. And if you saw him in the supermarket, he used to always say hi. And they're a very smart man, and I just think we had a chance. This is my chance to say thank you to him, maybe. And it's the little things in life are very important. And when he retired, he donated his war chest, I don't know what you call it, but to the Boys and Girls Club, and it was a nice sum.
I sent my political war chest to another political candidate who got in trouble. So I don't have such a honorable past with regards to that. Well, it wasn't my fault. He got into trouble.
Well, I met you earlier before at a lecture, and you mentioned about meeting your wife in an unusual way.
Well, that's a long story, but I had been part of the Reverend Moon's unification movement for some 25 years. And one of the hallmarks of that new religious organization was to have arranged marriages. And we were recipients of that blessing. And so I did have an arranged marriage to a beautiful Asian Korean woman. And we have 4 lovely children. But
So I was just going to say, she's a very, very sweet woman.
Yeah, well, there's some very funny stories.
Yes, that's why I was saying.
You have to read the book to get them.
That's why I dropped
Yes.
it, because you got to read the stories.
Because they say abstinence makes the heart and other body parts grow fonder. we'll tease you with that one.
Well, you'd also dropped your baseball team's exploits as well.
In fact, we're going to be having a reunion, members from the South Tahoe Viking baseball team who, after practicing, we broke a couple of rules. One was to go jackrabbit hunting. We were supposed to bring our bats, but not our shotguns to practice. And then some of the team, and I've since learned that a lot of teams visited this trailer of ill repute out at Moonlight Ranch. And again, as I say in the book, names have been forgotten to prevent the innocence that was lost. But the team did go there. Not all of us partook, and I'm not saying who did or didn't.
Names are to be protected in this book as well, so don't worry about buying the book. Buy the book and make sure your name's not in it. But you did mention a lot of people in your stories about your friends. You kind of got the feeling that you knew your friends. And balls to walls was one of the quotes that you said in there a couple times.
Well, I think that was Mary Housh. I may have said
something about that.
Well, the former editor of the Las Vegas Review-Journal, Mary Housh, who's Senator Bob Coffin's wife, she said that in the remarks about the book, that I had a balls-to-the-walls life.
Oh, I thought you were mentioning one of the...
Well, I did. That was talking about in boarding school.
Yes, that's what it was.
Berkeley in the mid-'60s, a dangerous place to unleash a youngster like me.
You were down there as a teenager, and you came back, and you weren't used to being restricted like you were there. You could do pretty much...
Well,
you had your freedom, as it were.
Well, the great irony was the more restrictions, the more creative we got around them in a boys' boarding school back in the day.
Well, you had some interesting environments to grow up in.
I was glad to come back to South Tahoe and finish my high school there, but boarding school was an interesting experience.
Well, also in the book you mentioned some of your experience at Chico, and I didn't know that was such a party school back then.
What, the Harvard of the West,
I
a
did
party
not-
school,
I did
Chico
not know
State?
that.
Well, it was the premier party school because they had something called Pioneer Days that was banned shortly after I was there.
It was banned.
Yeah, and so it's no longer Party School USA, and it's actually become somewhat reputable, I think, in the last 10 or 15 years. But yes, I did go to Chico State during the late 60s, and also refused induction into the Army, which is a big section of the book, what I went through, how it changed me, how it made me grow up, how it aged me, if not matured me. I wasn't one of the brave ones to actually go to Vietnam. I don't feel what I did was courageous necessarily, but it was an act of conscience at the time. Interestingly enough, my views on communism and even the justification of that war have changed a lot since that time. But at that moment in my life, I was like a lot of other kids from California and chose not to be inducted into the Army and faced prison. As it turned out, it was more of a prison of my own making, actually having to go to one.
Well, that's exactly the part of the book where I'm at now, so I haven't gotten any further, but I'm definitely on the must-read to continue process, because you make me nervous. Just your words it's very stressful, this part of the book. And so when you bounce back to parts of Tahoe, it makes me relax again. And it seems like you have this part where you're in the stressful area, and then you go back to some of your earlier stories. And some of your early stories aren't very relaxing either. You borrowed a truck.
Well, according to my insurance agent, he said he was glad he's not covering me, or there might have been a felony to face. Yes, we took a joyride in a truck up the hill of Heavenly Valley, and it went off the side. But my friend's neighbor reclaimed the truck, and we never said a word about it for about 3 years later. So I think the statute of limitations has run out on that grand larceny.
Well, I don't know. We'll have to call somebody. It's only been 44 years. I could picture that you're going up the Heavenly area.
Yeah.
And your first clutch experience.
Betsy fell out of gear. Well, no, I knew how to drive a clutch because of my dad's ice truck, but it fell out of gear and rolled backwards and went off the side, and we ran all the way home and back to the dorm in Berkeley, and literally never spoke to each other even about it for 3 months.
Yeah. Well, that's just one of those experiences you do as a...
I'm glad my kids learned all of this after they were teenagers.
Well, young people don't do the stupid stuff we do. Because you dream about it at night thinking, oh, I hope I don't get caught. And but people at 17, 18, things happen. But anyways, we're down to less than a couple minutes. And I think Tahoe Boy is a must-read. And is there anything in there you want to put out for us again? Your website, your phone number, or a particular memory? Or
Well, I think it's a book of memories, so I think that's why people enjoy it. They don't just learn about what this guy, as a Tahoe native, went through. I think they experience a lot of the things that they went through growing up in the 60s and 70s. Yes, love for you to read it, buy it, give me your email comments. I've gotten a lot of them. The website, again, is tahoeboy.net. And you can buy a copy on that, or it is in local bookstores in northern Nevada.
yeah, it's like I said, it's already sold out at Mortars, I heard. And well, anyways, thank you for joining us. I really appreciate it. So thank you, Pat Hickey, and
Thank you, Mike.
Tell them you bought the book, or sell them on Nevada Trails will help me out too. And thank you very much. And
Nice to be on Nevada Trails.
And
Thank you, Mike.
basically, I did flashback reading the book, and it's a must-read. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So, Michael Smith for Nevada Trails.